What's going on, gamers? I'm here for the meta report for patch 13.19b. We are 2 days into the patch, and the meta has started to stabilize a little bit. I think it will develop further, so we'll probably have another video in a few days. Let's just go over what is the most played, what is being successful, and what have I been seeing in my games, and that sort of thing. So first up, we all know about this. Vanquishers are OP. We all wanted it to be B-patched, but it wasn't B-patched. Don't know why. But we all wanted it. We all knew this would be the way that it is. And it's not just because people are playing this. If you have a pick rate that is 1.07 and the average placement is 4.26, that means most games, at least 2 people are going for the build. I mean, a pick rate, it doesn't exactly say it, but if it's 1.07, the way it'll manifest is in most of your games, at least 2 people are going for it. And those 2 people are still averaging about a 4th place. You're climbing if this is your average. So, yeah. If you guys want to play the Vanquisher build, the indicator is if you start the game with AD items, like a Last Whisper, that sort of thing. Xayah's items are Last Whisper +2 is our best in slot. You can go Guardbreaker GS, you can go Guardbreaker Deathblade, you can go Guardbreaker Runeance Hurricane. That's fine as well, right? That is the indicator to play Xayah Vanquishers. Now, if you have an emblem, because you can just play it because the build's OP. But the build is especially OP if you have an emblem. The average placement just like shoots up if you have an emblem, because then you don't have to play Aurelia in the mid game, and it helps out a lot. So I only personally go for the build if I'm presented with the emblem, or if you have Stolen Vitality, which is also a great indicator, which is the Vanquisher augment where you can heal. So right now, Legends to play in pretty much any build. Like Poro is very good right now, and then I also think that Ezreal is going to start to be the most popular legend. I was already playing it the first day. I'm starting to see a lot of other people pick it up because a lot of comps that are meta can use a whole lot of items, and general item power is pretty good right now. And I actually think the meta is pretty flexible, despite Vanquishers being just like sticking out like a sore thumb. And Ezreal can help with that because you can slam a lot of items for tempo and then flex around a lot of things. So yeah. Next up, we have Vanquisher Set. So this is if you have an Ionia emblem and you want to... There's 2 ways you can play this. If you have an Ionia emblem and you want to reroll Ashe, like you just get a lot of sets, a lot of Ashes early on in the game, you can elect to do that instead of playing Nilah. Especially if you see a lot of other people who are going to contest for the Nilah. So you can just be like, okay, I'll be the Ashe player. That's fine as well. You roll on 6, you slow roll on 6. Also, the other indicator to play this is if you get the boss. If you get the boss, you can also play this. And in that case, you're going to play a more damage-centric set, which is going to be like Jeweled Gauntlet Hodge +1 is usually what people play on the boss. Sometimes they play other things. You don't want to play tank the boss. But if you don't have the boss, then you can just build him tank, and then you're main carrying the Ashe in your backline, and you want to get 6 Ionia in as quick as you can. You'll slow roll on 6, so sometimes you need to go to 7 to get the Ionia in. So you can just decide if you want to do that after you get your 3 stars, or if you are going to push level. Sometimes you can fit it in on 6 depending on your emblems and that sort of thing. Okay, Sorcs. Sorcs have kind of fallen off a little bit. They were a lot better last patch, and they are not nearly as good. As you can see, the win rate is quite low for the comp that has... The average placement is not that bad. So I think the indicator to play Sorcs is if you have the +1, or you're on Placidium Library, and you have a Void Sorc opener with some good items, that sort of thing. You really do want the +1. Without the +1, it feels just like not as good as Invokers, personally. If you end up not having the +1 Sorc, you end up playing around like 4 Bastion. 4 Sorc, I think, is the best version without the +1 for mid-game. But you kind of end up, as I said, I think it's just a weaker version of the Invoker comp. We'll get to the Invoker comp in a second, because you're probably seeing me say it's a weaker version. The average placement is a lot lower. It's because no one knows how to play Invokers. Everyone is complete dog shit at playing Invokers. But I'll get you in a second. So yeah, the win condition of this comp is like you need to stabilize on a Silco 2 in the mid game, and then like you're just hoping you hit Ahri. And if you hit Ahri, you can win the game. You can get a higher placement. So I don't really like this build a whole lot. It's so conditional on hitting Ahri. Okay, Bruiser Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath has received so many nerfs, but Cho'Gath is still good. The pick rate is down from last patch. And yeah, this comp is still really good. I think the indicator to take this is if you have some, you start the game with like a Cho'Gath 2 or whatever, and then also you have like a Giga Econ augment, something like a Golden Ticket, right? That is going to allow you to play this. Pretty simple, guys. You just re-roll the bruisers. You get 6 bruisers in as quick as possible, and you either carry a 3-star Malzahar or 3-star Cassio. Pretty simple. You put Giga Tank items on Cho'Gath, which are, this is his best in slot right here, Redemption, Decaw, Bramble, and then you want to have a Spark somewhere or a Shiv somewhere in the build. Usually it's going to be Spark on your Renekton, and you just place them right next to your Cho'Gath, and there you go. But I think the indicator right now really is if you're just high rolling Cho'Gaths, or you have a Giga Econ augment with like the belt chain opener, that sort of thing, and you'll be good to go. Yeah, still a pretty solid build right now. Challengers are not nearly as good. The only time I would play Challengers is if you were just like really high rolling the build. Like you start the game with like Fiora items like Titans BT, and maybe you're thinking about flexing into Slayers, like Slayer Rek'Sai, that sort of thing. If you're thinking about, I think that's fine to play flex. And then you get like the best augments. You get like Gifts of the Fallen and that sort of thing. Even though Gifts of the Fallen got nerfed, it's still great on Kai'Sa and Fiora. So yeah, that's the only time I would play this comp. I would not look to force this comp or anything like that. You can see the pick rate is pretty high. The pick rate was a lot higher a few days ago. That's because the way TFT players work is when we go into a new patch, a lot of players are not willing to try anything new, and they just play what has worked in the past. That's why on patch day, I get a lot of messages from people or things in my comments, and I see a lot of other people talking about, man, this patch is just the same. But no, it's just because people will play the same things because that is what they know to be successful for them. But as you can see, the average placement is way down now in this comp. All right, Invokers. I have a whole guide on how to play Invokers on this patch. I actually one-tricked Invokers and climbed my main account, the Challenger. I'm now going to learn Flex on my Smurf. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now because I one-tricked too much. I got Nico brain. My brain is rotting out. But if you guys want to know how to play Invokers, I actually have a whole guide on it. It's my most recent video. I'll leave in the end card of today's video. So if you want to know more in depth, because there's a lot to playing Invokers. Actually, there's actually a lot of nuance. So if you want to learn how to play it, then make sure you check out that guide. But in short, you do not want to play 6 Invoker. 6 Invoker is not the way. A lot of people try to play 6 Invoker, and they are idiots. You want to play 4 and 4. 4 Bastion, 4 Invokers. Ideally, you want to get the level 7. You can roll a little bit on 6. And then your win conditions are a Soraka 3, a Karma 3, or a Nico 3, or all 3. And sometimes you can hit Taric 3 as well. Or everything 2-starred with an RE2. So there's a lot of nuance in there. I have won a lot of games with this. Combat augments are great. There's loads of great combat augments. I think Ezreal is great with this because you have so many spots to put your items. You have 4 places to put your items, and if you hit the Ahri, you have 5 places to put your items. So extra items is super, super, super good in this build. And yeah, so there's a lot of nuance. I can't really go into it because it really depends on all the install variations, what items you're getting, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think this comp is good, and I do enjoy playing this. Okay, Gunner Jayce. So Gunner Jayce is still actually performing pretty well. I had sub 0 arc in my game last night. He is a big Jinx player. He's still playing it. He went 8th in that game. But, that should show you that he is still trying to play it. He's a big Jinx player. So the indicator to play this is usually if you have one of 2 reasons. If you have a Piltover opener, then you're probably going to win. That's why the average placement rate and the win rate is really solid. Don't get it twisted. That's not because the build is super broken. It's because most of the time people are playing this is when they have the Piltover opener. And then you are, winning the game with a 3-star Jinx, 3-star Jayce. You're rolling down on 3-5, get a cash out, get a lot of econ, and then you get the extra gunners in, whether that's Gangplank or Felios or whatever. That is why the average placement is so good, so don't get it twisted. The other indicator to play this is if you get a gunner +1, like a gunner heart or a gunner emblem, then you can get a lot of gunners in, and in that case, it's very good. So I don't think you should just be like, oh, fuck it, I'm playing gunners like every game. I'm one-trick gunners. I think you really do need the indicators, and that's why you see the pick rate is low, but the win rate and the average placement is very good, and that is because the indicators for it are very strong. Okay, and next we have Bastion Nico. This is not how you play Nico. If you can get 6 Bastion, that's cool, but you need 2 emblems. I really think the strongest version of Nico is to play 4 Bastion, 4 Invoker. Now, I did play a Nico game yesterday in a very high elo lobby. I had Dish Soap and Kurum in that lobby. I ended up going 3rd, I believe. I played a Silco version because I was really contested for Invokers, so I played Silco, and I played a build that looked kind of like this. I had Silco and a Felios and that sort of thing. It definitely looked a lot like this, but I don't think you play this on purpose, and the only reason why that game went really well for me is because I was really far ahead, and I ended up carrying Silco and a Felios. I did this, but I think it's much better to play around the Invoker version of the build. But if you're trying to play that and you're contested, then play for the other version. That's fine. Okay, Demacia. Vertical Demacia has been doing pretty well on this patch. So if you have a Demacia +1 or you just have a really strong Demacia opener, when you play the Demacia opener, you usually want to have the Radiant on Galio because Radiant Redemption is extremely strong. However, if you have a super strong Poppy, that can be good. You usually don't want to have Kayle having the item early, even if you're going to reroll Kayle. So if you guys are going to reroll Kayle is pretty strong right now. So if you have an Econ Augment or you just have a really strong Kayle opener, you lost streak, and build a Rage Blade +1. It can be another Rage Blade. That's usually pretty good. And then you just three-star your rerolls. You're going to look for Kayle and Poppy usually, and sometimes you can hit Galio. And then you just level and add more Demacians. It's pretty as simple as that. Also, you could just play like tempo Demacians and carry Quinn. That's fine as well. I don't know if it's going to be on here, but Slayers are pretty good. I used to play a lot of Slayers last patch. I've been watching Soju play this morning. He's playing a lot of Slayers right now. So the way a lot of people are playing Slayers on this patch, and I'll just talk about it with Demacia, is they play like the Force Slayer build, which I also have a guide on the channel. You can go check it out. It's a Mordekaiser guide. Some things have changed since then, like legends and some itemization changes. But as far as the build goes, that is the build that I think is the easiest default. The Force Slayer, 2 Freljord, 2 Bruiser, 3 Demacia build. So if you guys want to learn more about that, there is some nuance there. So not that I'm going to go too deep into this video on, you know what I'm saying? So you can check that out if you'd like. But essentially, the way a lot of people are playing Quinn right now is they're building like the Xayah items because they're trying to climb and they're wanting to play around Xayah. But if you don't have like the best angle or you're not in the best spot and you see some other people have better spots to play the Xayah comp, then you can be like, okay, I'm just going to play Slayers, and you play for Quinn and you play for Quinn 3. You roll for that board, whether you're going to be playing around Demacia or playing around Slayers. It kind of depends on your spot a little bit. But I think the easy default is just going for Slayers. And you build for Quinn and build for Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser, when you play Mordekaiser, you want to just have like things like Crown Guard, attack speed items are really great. RFC, Nashers is like best in slot. You can do some healing items on them, GS on them, all that good stuff. But again, if you want to know more nuance about Mordekaiser, I have a whole video on it as well. Okay, Noxus Samira. I don't think this comp is that good anymore. I don't recommend playing this personally since they fixed in the Fury bug. I just don't think it's that good. I think tempo Noxus is really good. Like you get a Noxus crown. I think playing like going in the 5 Noxus, sometimes going in the 7 Noxus, and then carrying a Mordekaiser. I think if you have an upgraded Noxus units and Shurima units in the early game, that is just a really good early game. And I'd rather use that to get to my Mordekaiser comp and get to my full comp of upgraded Noxus units. I think I would rather do that instead of re-rolling. I just think that's stronger personally. Okay, Rogues. Rogues are still doing good despite the nerfs and everything. Rogues are still doing good. So Rogues are great if you have the indicator to play them. And that's why you see the pick rate is low, but the average placement is very good. And that is because Rogues are really good into front-to-back comps. And like Vanquishers is a front-to-back comp. Sorks is a front-to-back comp. Gunner comps are front-to-back. Bastion comps are front-to-back, right? So a lot of comps that are pretty in the meta are front to back. And so the indicator to play Rogues usually is you just have a lot of Graves, or you're playing like Caitlyn or Lee Sin, and you take Caitlyn Stars Are Born, and you have 6 Graves at the beginning of the game. Then that's a great indicator to play it. The items are really flexible in the build because you AD items here, AP items in a bunch of other spots. But the win condition for this build a lot of the times is 3-starring everything. So things like Golden Ticket are amazing for the build. You can slow roll on 6. You can slow roll on 7, right? So that's usually the win condition. If you can get an early Graves 3, then you can coast out for a top 4 a lot of times. But to win the game, you got to like really 3-star everything except for Jinx. Jinx is not as important, but yeah. So you got to 3-star everything and then add some Gunners in, but you can tech out the Gunners for like better units like Scion and that sort of thing as well. So pay attention to that. Also, a great indicator to play Rogue Graves is if you are taking something like Caitlyn or something where you can guarantee you hit your units. If the Ixtal is ice, it is very strong with Rogues. Okay, let's talk about Azir a little bit. I think Azir could be good this patch if Vanquishers weren't so good. So the problem with Azir is that Azir needs a lot of time. And you know what Vanquishers don't do? They don't give you time. Because you know what? Xayah just with Last Whisper and Nilah in front of her, she just one-shots your tank at the very beginning of the fight unless they are so giga tanky. So I think the only time I'm going to play Shurima Azir is if I have the Shurima opener and I get Shurima's Legacy. In which case that gives you so much tempo in the game and just allows you to top 4 in that way. And if you can like fully get the vertical online, let's say like Shurima Legacy, Placidium Library, you get the 7 Shurima online with that setup. That is pretty good. But outside of that, like if you're just defaulting to this build, yeah, Azir is good. It's just he's not good into Vanquishers, and Vanquishers are too good. So there we go. Oh, and here is the Slayer build right here. But this is what I'm talking about. The version that they're showing is really unrealistic. If you hit Scion, this is the version you play on 7. But you're rolling for this build on 7. This is completely unrealistic. So that's why the default is to play around Bruisers and play the Sejuani with Ashe and Rek'Sai. But if you do hit the Aatrox and you do hit the Scion, your build can look like this on 7, and then you go to 8 and you play 6 Slayer. You'll play Qiyana and Rek'Sai, and you don't need to play Freljord or any of that stuff. 6 Slayer is a huge spike. It literally doubles from 4 Slayer. It goes from 20% to 40% damage amp. So that is quite nice. Noxus Mordekaiser, we already talked about this. This is where you have the Noxus opener, you get Noxus Crown, and then you just tempo into Mordekaiser. You roll for the comp on 7. The best targets for Noxus Emblem are things like Nefiri, Qiyana are great holders, and then it goes on to Aatrox or Azir. Usually those are great targets to hold it. Bilgewater, if you have Rising Infamy opening, especially if you get Rising Infamy and you're playing on Placidium Library, Vertical Bilgewater is very strong once you get 7 or 9 online, especially if you're able to tempo into the build. You get to utilize Nilah, you get to contest Nilah from the Vanquisher players, so that's pretty cool there. So yeah, this is a good comp. Yeah, I take it in those circumstances I described. Once you get online, it's very strong. Void, so if you have a Void +1, especially if you're on Placidium Library, Void is really good for top 4ing. You see the average placement is very good. The win rate is not super high. Very good for top 4ing because Void opener is very strong in the early game. And then if you get a Void +1 or you're playing on Placidium Library, you can guarantee the Rift Herald in the mid game. Pretty stable in the mid game. Rift Herald is. It's not necessarily going to win streak because the Vanquisher players are hitting. And then if you can get Baron online and some Bel'Veth items, it's very nice. But also you could just coast on a 6 on a 6 Void and just build a strong comp around it, and that'll usually get you a top 4, especially if you tempoed early game. All right, last thing we're going to talk about, I think, is going to be multicasters. I'll be the first one to tell you, I have never played this comp. I'm not a big multicaster player, but it seems like you just slow roll on 6 guys, and I have seen some TFs start to really pop off. I don't recommend you take TF Legend. I think you just probably take Ezreal, and if you get the AP items, then you can play the build. And yeah, I'm not really sure how to play this build, but it seems like you just reroll a lot of multicasters. It seems like people aren't playing the knockup version, like the Talia knockup version. It looks like you're playing more for TF, it looks like. But yeah, honestly, I haven't really played the build. And then some of the hero augment-based builds, I'm not a huge fan of, like Ravenous Hunter. The boss is very good. I think if a lot of people are playing the boss, you can play stuff like Winds of War and Ravenous Hunter because the pool is thin for you, so you can probably hit your units. But I don't think you should just take those augments and just play it. I think the only one like that, only hero augment you just take is the boss if you want to play around Vanquishers and that sort of thing. You want to play around these super meta comps. But anyways, guys, that is it for the meta report. Good luck climbing.